night haul. I've been a trucker for over a decade, hauling freight across the country under the blanket of the night. It's a lonely profession, but it pays the bills. There's something about the desolation of those empty highways that can get to you, though, especially when you start hearing stories about the things that happen out there in the dark. I remember one particular night, a few years back, when I had a haul that took me through the desolate stretch of Interstate 40 in the American Southwest. The moon hung heavy in the sky, casting an eerie pallor over the barren landscape, and my truck's engine rumbled like a steady heartbeat in the night. The radio hummed with static as I pushed on, a thick tension in the air. I'd heard stories about this part of the highway, tales from fellow truckers about strange occurrences and ghostly encounters. I'd always dismissed them as the ramblings of sleep-deprived drivers, but that night would change everything. As I drove deeper into the darkness, my headlights picked out a figure standing on the shoulder ahead. It was a young woman, her thumb outstretched, seeking a ride. I slowed down and pulled over, thinking it was strange for someone to be out here at this time of night. She climbed up into the cab, and I could see the fear in her eyes. She had long, tangled hair, and her clothes were tattered and dirty. Her name was Sarah, she said, and she had been hitchhiking her way across the country. She seemed desperate, so I offered her a ride and a warm place to sit. As we continued down the highway, Sarah began to tell me her story. She had been on the road for weeks, fleeing from something or someone. She spoke of a malevolent force, an entity that seemed to follow her no matter where she went. It was a darkness, she said, a shapeless evil that tormented her every step. I tried to console her, telling her that she was safe now, that she was with me. But as she spoke, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. It was as if the very air around us had thickened with a malevolent presence. The radio crackled and spat static, and the road ahead seemed to stretch on endlessly. The hours passed, and the highway continued to wind its way through the desolation. Sarah's story grew darker and more disturbing. She spoke of strange, shadowy figures that appeared at night, of whispered voices that echoed in her ears. I couldn't help but feel a chill creep down my spine, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Just as I was about to dismiss her story as the delusions of a troubled mind, something happened that made my blood run cold. The truck's headlights picked out a dark figure standing on the side of the road ahead. It was a tall, hooded figure, its face obscured by shadows. I slammed on the brakes, the truck skidding to a halt. The figure turned slowly to face us, and I felt a wave of terror wash over me. Its eyes, or what I could see of them, glowed with an unnatural, malevolent light. Sarah let out a scream, and I could feel her grip on my arm tighten. In a panic, I threw the truck into reverse and hit the gas, wanting nothing more than to put as much distance between us and that dark figure as possible. The entity watched us, unmoving as we sped away. As we drove on, I could hear it, the voice, a whisper in the wind, a sinister murmur that seemed to seep into my very bones. It spoke in a language I couldn't understand, a series of guttural, otherworldly sounds that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to convince myself that I had imagined it, that the stress of the situation had gotten to me. But Sarah heard it too. She clutched her ears and sobbed, begging me to make it stop. The radio blared with static, the sound growing more distorted and unsettling. I knew we couldn't keep going like this, that whatever we had encountered was beyond our comprehension. We needed help. I grabbed my phone, but there was no signal, just an eerie silence on the other end. The truck's engine sputtered and coughed, and the lights flickered. In the distance, I saw the dark figure again, standing on the side of the road. It was closer this time, and its eyes bore into me with a malevolent intensity. With a final burst of adrenaline, I veered the truck off the highway and into the desert, leaving the road behind. The truck's engine died, and the headlights went out, plunging us into darkness. Sarah and I huddled in the cab, our hearts pounding, as the voice in the wind grew louder and more insistent. I couldn't tell if it was in my head or all around us, but it was maddening. We waited in that darkness for what felt like an eternity, the sense of dread growing with every passing moment. Finally, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon. The moment the sun's rays touched the truck, the malevolent presence seemed to recede. The radio crackled back to life, and the engine roared to life with a powerful purr. We were no longer alone in the dark. I turned the truck around and got back on the highway, leaving the horrors of that night behind. Sarah and I never spoke of what had happened, and she eventually got off at a truck stop in the next town. But I knew that I would never forget the night when I encountered something truly inexplicable, something that defied all rational explanation. As I continued on my journey, I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors might be lurking out there on those desolate highways, waiting for the next unsuspecting traveler to cross their path. And as the miles stretched out before me, I couldn't escape the feeling that somewhere out there, that dark figure was still watching, still waiting,